Let's talk about what's happening in Sri Lanka. The country has run out of money and the economy is in free fall. There are shortages of food, fuel, and medicine. The currency has crashed and prices for everything are sky high.
දැන් අපිට කිව්වා
Why is the
කෑමට
quality so bad?
මදි එක වීදක් නෙවෙයි මදි. ඉතින් එක වේලක් තමයි ඉතින් කණ්ඩ වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
And a lot of Sri Lankans blame the government and President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. There have been weeks of protests across the country. The Prime Minister, Mahinda Rajapaksa, who's the president's brother, has quit.
Yeah, so I think this family has like a hold on Sri Lankan politics, and the president is really powerful, and he hasn't quit or anything yet. But like everyone else has just had to like resign and do all of this stuff. But the main problem that I think a lot of people have in Sri Lanka are like because of like the president, and like he rules everything and the policies that are there.
Things have gotten pretty violent. Government supporters stormed the main protest camp in Colombo.
Almost about 20,000 came with sticks, heavy sticks, and they beat all of us.
Anti-government protesters set fire to the homes of some ruling party
That's
officials.
insane. Like they defaulted on their foreign debt, like their economy is completely in shambles.
And stormed the prime minister's compound. He had to be rescued by the army. Several people have been killed and hundreds have been wounded.
It's a economic crisis that was brought on by a political crisis, and now we're just generally in crisis.
So why are so many Sri Lankans fed up with the Rajapaksa family? What's gone wrong with the economy? And what's it going to take for Sri Lanka to get out of this mess? Let's start with the Rajapaksas. They're a family dynasty who've dominated Sri Lankan politics for nearly 20 years. They've been accused of nepotism, corruption, and being bad administrators. Mahinda Rajapaksa served 2 terms as president and gave dozens of family members government jobs. There was a new president in 2015 from an opposing party. And then 4 years later, Mahinda's younger brother, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, was elected president. He made Mahinda prime minister and handed out a bunch of other jobs to relatives.
We had the son as sports minister, we had, the other brother, the nephew, you can just go on, and the daughter-in-law's mother and cousins, etc., were all appointed to different positions, and it became a family business.
So Sri Lanka, though it has followed the electoral democratic process, and everyone who is in parliament and the president has been elected, has also the features of a family-run state and sort of authoritarian structures.
Now, when it comes to the economy, both Mahinda and Gotabaya Rajapaksa are accused of messing things up pretty badly. For a long time, the government has been spending more than it takes in, and Sri Lanka also imports more than it exports. That means it's been using up more foreign currency than it's earning. Now, a lot of countries do this, and they borrow money to make up the shortfalls. That's not necessarily a problem. It's actually pretty normal for any modern economy. But in Sri Lanka's case, the debts have become unmanageable. The government's basically run out of money. Think of it like having a huge credit card bill and getting to the point where you can't pay the minimum balance each month. For Sri Lanka, that's the $7 billion due this year. In April, the government defaulted on its loans, admitting it can't make the debt payments anymore.
Our reserves kept coming down until the reserves came to zero.
It's crazy to think about, and it can happen in my country as well.
And the situation exploded.
I guess not immediately, but still.
To the current crisis that we have now.
There's not even enough foreign currency left to pay for the imports of essential goods, and it's led to terrible shortages and long lines for things like cooking gas.
අපේ රටේ ජනතාවට ගෑස් නැහැ, තෙල් නැහැ, ආහාර නැහැ, සල්ලි තිබ්බත් බඩු මුට්ටු ගන්න නැහැ.
People are now starving. Medicine is in short supply. You don't really know what holds for people tomorrow.
So why are so many people blaming the Rajapaksas for all of this? Well, there are a few big reasons why the situation got so bad. When Mahinda Rajapaksa was president, he started spending big time on huge infrastructure projects, some of which ended up being duds.
Like the Lotus Tower, on which we spent 400 million rupees, which is not being used at all, and
Just made a useless tower and spent so much money on it.
getting into debt for these projects. We've also had massive corruption. So it is a cumulative thing.
Cricket stadiums and even port expansions that took place didn't have a return that justified their investment.
So years of this kind of high spending and high borrowing was already storing up problems for the future. And then, when the current president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, came to power in 2019, he made a couple of drastic decisions that totally derailed the economy. First, he followed through on his election promise to bring in huge tax cuts. But those
you an
cuts
idiot?
meant the government suddenly lost out on a lot of money, about 25% of its revenue.
The government stated
Damn.
that the reason is that they were going to give more incentives to people, to businesses to earn more and then develop the economy and provide employment. But
The
also
stupid
the
trickle-down
reason was
economics
that they
never
were
works.
facing a
Stupid trickle on economics now.
general election. After the presidential election, a few months later,
This was not something that was advised. It was not based on expert advice or research. It was a populist move.
The other thing Gotabaya Rajapaksa did was to force Sri Lanka's farmers to go completely organic. Pretty much overnight, the government banned the use and import of all chemical
What the hell are you doing? How will they grow their food properly?
fertilizers.
no country in the world goes into organic farming 100%. At best, developed countries like Germany have maybe 10 to 15% organic farming.
And it was disastrous for Sri Lanka's
Of course it
farmers,
was.
who were suddenly producing much less. It got so bad that Sri Lanka had to start importing rice, something it never had to do before. And
Was this person just trying to destroy Sri Lanka?
food prices went way up.
What it did was cause an escalation in prices in the local market for staple foods that people were accustomed to getting easily and cheaply.
And remember, while all this was going on over the last couple of years, there was also the pandemic and all the problems that caused. The tourism industry took a massive hit, and tourism is usually one of Sri Lanka's biggest earners and an important source of foreign currency. So basically, by the middle of last year, all of these problems were coming to a head, and it was already clear what kind of financial trouble the country was in. But the government didn't really face up to it.
Analysts say the government is like an ostrich with its head in the sand.
Not taking corrective action was the huge governance and policy mistake that was made, I think, which caused the crash to be so much more severe than it could have been.
So what happens now? Well, on the economic front, Sri Lanka desperately needs cash. India has offered up more money to help with fuel imports. China has also put more loans on the table. But the main hope is to secure a big bailout from the IMF.
Oh,
Talks
no,
have started,
IMF.
but a deal is still months away.
That's
at
going to be
best.
another
These
disaster.
negotiations have a lot of technical hoops to jump over. Sri Lanka really does have to show that there is a legitimate, stable government that is able to deliver on the undertakings given to the IMF and the creditors.
And that's a whole other challenge, because things really aren't looking too stable on the political front. President Rajapaksa has now appointed a new prime minister, Ranil Wickremesinghe. He's from an opposition party and has had the job 5 times before. The idea is that he'll head up a new unity government, i.e., one that brings together lots of different political parties to try to find a way out of the crisis. But so far, the main opposition parties are refusing to get on board. They want what the protesters want, for Gotabaya to go.
He has to, like, the
Whatever
stuff he's done.
happens, the longer it all drags out, the more painful it's going to get for the Sri Lankan people. Some of those big infrastructure projects that we talked about were actually backed by China, part of a mega project known as the Belt and Road Initiative. We've got an episode on that, which you can watch here.
That's another whole can of worms.